Hello, everybody. Welcome to Productivity and Tea. I am here joined today by Danielle Massi. We are going to have a really great conversation about all things productivity, mindset, self-care. That's the core of what we talk about, but there's a whole lot of other things I am excited to pick Danielle's brain about that she knows a whole lot more about than I do and that I think you'll all be really interested in. Of course, before we dive into that, I want to address the tea part of productivity and tea and share what I'm sipping today. I have some sugar plum dream tea in my cup, which sounds kind of wintry. I know we're only in October, so we're not quite ready. I'm thinking of like sugar plum fairies and all that stuff from the Nutcracker. It's not quite that, but it is a really interesting dark fruits and a black tea and a little bit dark and mysterious. And I thought it would pair really nicely with the topic of shadow work, since that's a little bit not scary, but dark and mysterious in a way with all the unconscious stuff. So we'll get into that and talk about a little bit more about how that makes any sense. But yeah, I wanted to share a little bit about that tea. And of course, anybody who signed up for this, who registered, when you get a copy of the recording, there will be a link to that tea. If it sounds like something you're interested in, go ahead and check it out. We may also, if we're lucky, be joined by our siphologist, Melissa, to tell us a little bit more about the tea. But for now, we're going to switch gears and we'll talk to Danielle. So again, let me introduce myself real quick. Kelly, my name is Kelly. I am the owner of D20 Theory, a lifestyle brand for multi-passionate women. Productivity and tea is just one of the ways that I love to support our community with their productivity and mindset and self-care, which is why we talk about all of these things and why I love learning how all of that works for different women who are multi-passionate and doing all the things so well. I know it all looks effortless. I'm sure none of it is effortless, but we all find things that work for us. And I have found it so valuable over the years to learn from other women about what works for them, because it really doesn't make sense for us to figure it all out on our own. We have a community to learn from and to lean on. So without further ado, I am here with Danielle today, and Danielle is a master shadow work practitioner, best-selling author, motivational speaker, CEO of the Wellness Collective. She is her signature program is the Create Your Light Academy. She's also the founder of the Selfish Philly Self-Care Conference. She wears a lot of hats in addition to all of those things. So welcome, Danielle. It's so nice to be here with you this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I know I just kind of introduced you like real quickly in the longest run-on sentence ever. Do you want to share in your own words who you are, what you do, what makes you multi-passionate, what roles and skills and talents did I leave out?
I feel like when I try to come up with what I do, it is a bit of a clusterfuck, honestly, because I do a lot of things. But the way that I do a lot of things is I try to set up as many systems as I can so that all the different things that I do run at the same time with as little effort from me on a daily basis as humanly possible. So it's not like
Yeah.
I'm doing all these things every second of my life. I bop into each one of them for periods of time. So if that sounded intimidating to anyone, it really is not what it sounds like, though each one of those things on its own is massive. And creating those systems and being productive around that is so important for me and what I do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I know, like, on top of all of the official titles and roles and all of those things that you can very proudly, own, like, you're a mom. At the end of the day, like, you're a mom, you're a woman, you're a person.
I am.
You're
I just gave my son
anything
a
that
shower
anybody
right
else is.
before this.
What was that?
I just gave my son a shower right before this, right after I made my daughter dinner. And now when I finish with you, it's going to be the opposite. He'll eat dinner, she'll shower.
See, so you've got those systems that work. It's not all about business. I know it's really easy as somebody who runs a multifaceted business or, is a, multi-passionate entrepreneur to talk about that all day, every day, because it's what you focus on so much of the day. But actually what allows you to do all of those things so well starts with like your home life and your personal life and figuring out how you can lay that foundation, because you're a person before you're any of those other titles, and you have to figure out what works for you at that basic level first. And it sounds like you've got some things that are really working.
I do. And I really think it's important for everybody. And I don't know what the women in your group do, but I think there's this idea of hustle culture where you need to feel like you're being productive and you're constantly doing things, you're making things happen. But I think when we put too much emphasis on that, we're doing things just to do them. And we're actually going to do better off when we figure out how to do less. How do we actually scale it back while still maintaining the same level of energy and whatever it is that we do? It's critical. It's the only way that we can really be multi-passionate.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. I really couldn't agree with that more. I think there's a lot of misconceptions when I introduce myself as a productivity coach. People kind of are like, oh, that sounds great, but I also don't know. It sounds a little bit intimidating. Like there's always these kind of mixed feelings that there's going to be some
I
pressure.
relate to that with shadow work where people are like, oh, shadow.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's not
exactly. There's just these connotations that people have with words, and I guess that really makes a little bit more work for us to communicate really clearly what we do, why it's important, and what it's not, I guess, just as importantly as what it is, because those misconceptions can get in the way of somebody accessing a service or a resource that can change their lives.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that's kind of our responsibility as somebody who's providing those service.
I couldn't agree more. I literally spend all my time on TikTok trying to teach people what shadow work is not. Because of people on that app who are trying to tell others what it is, and they just get it so wrong.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. And you are definitely the shadow work queen or the shadow queen. I guess you could use either title, whether you want to
Neither
put work in the
one.
middle of it.
I've definitely become, at least not like nationally, but now becoming internationally known as the person for shadow work. So it puts a little bit of responsibility on my shoulders too, to make sure that people understand what it is. It feels like a burden, but a nice one. I don't mind being that person.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it probably feels a little bit less like a burden because you do know it. You are an authority. You've been doing it for a very long time.
Wrote the book
Or
on it.
yeah, that's where I was gonna go. And you have a book, so even if somebody's like, I don't really use TikTok, which would be me. Like I'm not, I'm not learning anything wrong on TikTok because I'm not on TikTok, but I'm also not accessing all of the great content that you or other people in your space that do know a whole lot about what it is and what it isn't are putting out there. So yeah, what is that kind of one of the main reasons you wanted to write a book, to kind of put those myths away? Or I guess tell me a little bit more about where the book came from.
Yeah, it actually wasn't even my idea. The publishing house came to me and said, you're the person for shadow work, based on the fact that I have been interviewed by huge outlets like New York Magazine, The Cut, Shondaland, Huffington Post, Shape Magazine. So all these different outlets, it always comes back to me when shadow work is the topic. So they came to me and said, we want you to write this book about it. And we really wanted to come from this angle of having the science mixed with the spirituality, where it shouldn't be all one or all the other. So I was trying to toe that line the entire time through the book writing process. And a lot of what I put in here was based around the idea that I want people to understand shadow work so that they're not confused, because people talk about shadow work all the time, but they usually just talk about how they do it and not what it is. And usually how they do it is like 2 steps into shadow work and not the 10 that it takes to actually go all the way deep. So this book is definitely a labor of love, but I'm so glad that it's out there now.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like a definitely a labor of love, like a big challenge, but also like challenge accepted.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an author. That was like everybody wanted to be a princess or like a
Yeah.
ballerina. I wanted to be an author. I used to write books for my kindergarten and my first grade class. And this was very much like a dream come true, which was
Oh,
cool.
that's so awesome. You should go back to like your kindergarten or first grade class and be like, so if you really
I
want to be an
did.
author, you can do
I
it.
sent a copy to my teachers.
Oh, that's
I said I
amazing.
did it.
I love that. I love that. That is, that just like warms my heart.
I know.
Because teachers put in so much work, and
They
I imagine,
do.
especially a lot of the real, younger grades, you don't hear so much later on, like who became a success. Maybe a little bit more so in high school. High school teachers, you're a little bit more
Totally.
connected to, when you're closer to actually doing the things that you're doing. But yeah, I imagine until your name, is up in lights and like all over the news, your kindergarten teacher's probably not going to hear your name unless you send
Probably
her a
not.
book. That's great. I need to remember that next time I have like a big milestone, like send it back to kindergarten.
I
That's
think any of the
great.
people who help you do anything, you should let them know that they were a part of it. It's
Yeah.
nice for people to hear.
I agree. I agree. I think that gratitude as kind of like an internal practice, something you do for yourself, but also the way you share it with others is really important. I mean, it's a huge part of my mindset practice, especially because I am such a like busy, productive, like go 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 person. As much as I am not a fan of hustle culture. I am just naturally like a very motivated person to keep going and getting things done,
Yeah.
checking off those check boxes. So
Have you
to
ever done
take,
your human design
yeah, I've
generator?
actually learned more about that recently, and how it's definitely still pretty new to me. Um, but I have learned recently that is kind of a little bit of a part of me, and it's
Yeah.
almost helped me. It's not really like telling me who I am or who I'm supposed to be, but more so validating things that I already knew about myself, like
Yeah.
giving me the okay to accept, like, okay, I do a lot. I'm allowed to do less. I'm allowed to to take a break. And part of that is taking a break to practice gratitude, to be thankful, to also, express that in certain ways to certain people, and not just keep moving, but take time to pause, reflect, and move on and make sure I'm moving in the right direction when I'm moving. Because I do like to move. I like to keep going. But if you just keep going and never stop to reflect,
You miss
you
it.
could be going in the wrong direction for a long time.
Right. And you don't get to enjoy it. You miss all the
Yep.
best parts. The journey is the important part. I've
Yep.
hit some huge milestones in the past 5 years, like things I never ever thought I would accomplish. And when it first started happening, I still was goal driven, where I was like, well, when I get this, then I'll stop. When I get this, then I'll stop. Then I'll notice. And I
Mhm.
missed some huge things that I could have really just let sunk in and been happy about. So now every time I hit a milestone, even with Selfish Philly a couple of weeks ago, I always take a minute to slow down and connect and just enjoy every piece of it, because it changes how you experience the journey.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. So now that you've had, a little bit of time to decompress from Selfish, which I imagine takes a whole lot of planning and a whole village to put together, and I heard you ended up being the keynote speaker at the
I
end
did.
and everything. Like that's so many things going on at once. Now that you've had some time to like breathe or reflect, what did you enjoy most, or what do you feel was most, the greatest sense of accomplishment from this year's Selfish Philly conference?
I think for this and any event that I host, and this is like very cheesy of me, but I love seeing the look on other people's faces. And we usually start the day off with a sound healing from Luna May. And that's just a transformative experience. And I'd love to sit in the audience, but I can't help myself. I have to go up high and watch everybody else do it. So I went up onto the mezzanine and I was just looking down at everybody's faces. And you could just see like how it transforms them. You can see tears well up in people's eyes. Same thing with the panels, like really important discussions were happening. The womb panel, Roe v. Wade came up, and people are obviously feeling really impacted and touched by that. So all these conversations, you can see how much it moves people. That's the best part of it for me, and it's worth it every time, even though it
Yeah.
takes so long to plan.
I bet. It's especially like starting the day with Luna May. That's amazing. It's an experience that you can't really describe unless you're there. It's like, oh, okay,
Absolutely.
it's sound, it's, her voice, it's this. Like you could describe all the components, but it will never, you
It'll
know,
never touch it. I don't do drugs,
yeah.
but I imagine that listening to her is what drugs feel like.
Yeah, I couldn't particularly relate. I couldn't tell you for sure, but yeah, it's definitely like such a different experience. It's
Mhm.
really interesting, really intriguing to me, especially when you think, you do meditation, you do, all these different things, and you're like, wait, this is different. There's a new thing. I'm
Yeah,
30. I thought that I had experienced everything. Of course, I
not
thought I
even
experienced
close.
everything when I was 22, but
And we never will. There's too many things.
yeah, and that's one of the fun and scary things in life. So we talked a little bit about your new book. Is there another book that has inspired you that you've read, whether it's about shadow work or something completely different, that is just like inspiring to you that you would like to share with the D20 theory community?
This one's a little deep, but I feel like it should be recommended reading for everybody besides my book. My book's easier to read than this one that I'm going to recommend, but it's worth
Okay.
it. It's called Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And basically, the book is written by a doctor who he had a spinal injury that was supposed to leave him paralyzed. And instead of getting surgery, which was recommended, he said, no thanks. And he went home and he laid in bed for 6 months. And every day he imagined giving himself the spinal surgery that the doctor said they were going to do to him until eventually the nerve endings connected and he got up out of bed and walked. And he's
Wow.
taught other people around the world how to heal from everything: cancer, lupus, multiple sclerosis, you name it. And we don't realize how powerful our bodies are and what we're capable of because we are taught that there's limitations. And we're also given so much distraction and everywhere else in our life that we don't realize how capable we are of healing. Yeah, Joe Dispenza's YouTubes are all amazing. He has a channel on Gaia called Rewired that's incredible. He definitely is someone who influenced my book, but there was one piece of his book that influenced it where I thought, let me move away from what he's doing. And it's that a lot of the things that he does are very science-based, where it makes it hard to understand. I studied cognitive neuroscience in college, and that's a huge part of the work that I do. And there were pages that I read that I was like, wait, what did I just read? And I had
Yeah,
to
you
go
need a
back
little
to
bit
the
of a
top.
refresher, even with a degree.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've definitely done that. I majored in psychology. I have my bachelor's and my master's in it, and I didn't do like a specific track, but some of the most challenging and rewarding classes I took were very like specific like neuroscience type classes, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, they're the things that help you understand all the other things that you're
Yes.
learning about, which is
Well,
why they're really interesting.
yeah, I made a point when I wrote Shadow Work to take the science and make it digestible for anybody. My parents are both very blue collar. My mom went to college for a couple years, dropped out. My dad did the same thing. My dad owns a plumbing company right now. So I was like, if you guys can regurgitate this back to me and you understand it, we are good. Because they're both very smart, but it's not science book smart in the same way. So I figured if we could all get down in the same place, we were in a good spot and they both got it. So I knew we'd be okay. It's important for me that everybody has access to the information. And it doesn't matter what your reading level is. It doesn't matter what your school background is. We should all know how to heal ourselves. It's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And it sounds like that was something that the publishers, were accepting of, or maybe even enthusiastic about with this as well, which is great because they kind of had an idea for you, but you had your own ideas of where you wanted to go with it too, which is expected. And I wouldn't want to write a book if I didn't have so much say in it. It's like, great, thanks for the compliment, I'm great at this thing and you want me to write a book, but but it also has to be from you and feel good, because I imagine that's a lot of work too.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with the publishing house is most of the time my situation was bizarre in that they came to me. That's very rare.
Mm.
Usually you go to them and you have a book proposal laid out. They're about 50 pages long and it breaks down everything that's going to be included in the book, including titles, subtitles, what each chapter is going to break down into. So the publishers know exactly what they're getting into ahead of time. So for me, it was like, we want you to write this and like, we hope it doesn't suck. And then we figured it out from there. But I do have a course just added to the list of things I do called Writers Academy, where I teach people how to write a book from scratch. from creating the book proposal all the way through to like actually marketing the book every step of the way. And I go into in explicit detail. Like there is nothing that you should have a question mark about, including an actual template that after you do all the work that I make you do ahead of time, you're essentially plug and playing all your stuff into the template for a book proposal so you can send it out to agents and you don't have to think. It's easy.
That's amazing. I had no idea that was something you were doing. And
I never
that's,
officially launched it. It's only been something that's available to my clients and the people who showed up to my
oh.
events because I'm busy enrolling for other things. Something that's really important for me with my enrollments is that I always focus on one thing at a time. So it was the book launch, then it was Selfish Philly. Now we're open for Create Your Light Academy. And when that is done enrolling, we're about halfway filled already, even though I only opened 8 days ago, which is super exciting. Once that's done, my shadow work certification course opens. And then I'll officially announce Writers Academy. So people who are looking for it can ask me for it, but it's not something I'm advertising to the general public just yet.
Wow, wow. That's great. That's a really great strategy and something I kind of had to learn the hard way of
I
doing.
think most of us do.
Not doing too many things. I have all that ideas. I have all the passion. I have the motivation. I know I have the skills. I have, you have the best confidence in your abilities, but there are right and less right ways to go about things that, things that'll make you more successful. And that's one of those things, is focusing on one thing at a time, so that it's better for you to focus on one thing, but it also is a lot less confusing for your audience to not have to digest so much information. And
Yeah,
that's the part that didn't click with me initially. I was like, I can get it. I'll figure it out. And then somebody was like, yeah, but it's not just you. It's confusing
right.
to your
Nobody else
audience. And I was
knows.
like,
Yeah.
oh,
I
you mean
work
it's
with
about
some
other
people.
people?
Yeah, I work with students also. This is something that I only open up for Create Your Light Academy students who've gone through it. I have a business course and it's just for them because I feel like once you've done your shadow work, it's just so easy to create and scale a course and have it be something that is coming from the right place. And I
Yeah.
tell them this all the time. You need to have one focus that people know you for, because if you're the person who isn't known for anything, no one will remember you and they won't be able to find you. So we were discussing human design before. If I'm looking for someone to do a human design reading with, I'm not going to go to the person who has a human design course and they're also a professional organizer and they're also a dog walker. Like, I don't know what they do and I can't figure it out. And their marketing's all over the place. The same
Yeah.
way, like with restaurants, like you see McDonald's advertising, there's no reason for them to advertise. Everybody knows who they are and what they do. And they still spend literally like $1 billion a year on advertising because they want to make sure that when you think about wanting a shitty burger and fries, that they are the name that pops into your head, and it does.
That's funny because I've never heard those exact words on their commercials, but but it's what comes to mind.
You want a shitty burger and fries because this is where you want it from.
The subliminal messaging.
They know what they're doing. And I think there's something to be said for that. I don't eat it, but I understand the marketing behind it, and it's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I cannot remember the last time I had McDonald's, but yeah, it's not like I don't know who they are, that I, would be confused. Like, it's been a while. What do they serve
Right.
again? Everybody knows.
There's a comedian who says that. He's like, the menu's been the same since you were 6 years old, front to back, left to right. You know it.
Yep, yep. So with all this stuff going on, how do you take time for self-care? What have you done recently with, launch after launch, or what do you plan to do since you still got a few more launches going on after this?
I set up as many systems as humanly possible. So when I started, I didn't have money for a team. So I tried to find online systems that existed where I can automate as much of my life as possible. So what I do is I create a lot of my content for all of my enrollments on Canva, and I have all the captions that are going to go with them created in a Word document that pairs with it, so that it can just automatically go. I don't have to think. I don't have to wake up and go, what do I want to say today? That's never the case. I batch all of my TikToks. I batch all of my reels. So there's one day you'll see me in different outfits because I'm changing in my closet in between takes. And I just batch my content. I make as much of it as humanly possible. I schedule out my Facebook posts. I'm not writing them the day of. I never do. And that way, most days, all I have to do is sit and wait to receive. So most days, once I get my kids out the door or on the bus and ready to go for school, I sit and I eat my breakfast and I have a cup of decaf coffee. And I usually just look outside. I moved to Marlton, New Jersey since the pandemic started, and there's deer here. I live in the middle of nowhere. I'm in the woods. It's lovely. Sometimes I sit outside and I just listen to the birds, and it's really nice. I'll do that for a while. And then sometimes I'll take a bath. Today I rode the Peloton in the middle of the day and then took a shower because why not? Because I have all of these systems in place. I don't have to worry about it. And when I do enrollments, I hop on phone calls with people because I want to make sure not only are they a good fit for my program, but am I a good fit for them? Am I the best person to help them or not? Because if I'm not, I don't want them to sign up with me. I want them to find the person who's going to help them more. So I'll do a few phone calls a day. With any enrollment, I usually have like 15 calls a week, but I can space them out so that I'm resting most of the time and just receiving. Plus a little bit of shadow work is always good, just to make sure that my energy is clear and that there's nothing holding me back. Because something that people don't realize is that most of the time we're very triggered by things like money. We're triggered by fears of time, or is this not going to go well? Are people going to care what I have to say? And underlying all of that is just the body and the mind working together to keep you where you are now, because that homeostasis where you currently exist is more comfortable than the growth that it will take to move somewhere new. But without shadow work, it's hard to really feel that because you don't know where those fears come from. But with shadow work, we can go back and see it and let them go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so well said. And as you're talking about it, like I've heard your story before about how you started doing shadow work, how that's important to you, and I have an idea of what it is. But I realize we haven't really specifically defined it, even though we've been talking about it. So for anybody who's sitting here like, this sounds great, I think, but what's the missing piece? Can you give like a one-liner of like what shadow work is? just in case we missed anybody and we totally went over somebody's head here.
It's hard to give a one-liner, but I can give a 2-minute quick breakdown of it. Shadow is the unconscious mind, and we all have 3 levels of consciousness. We have what we are fully aware of, which is your conscious. So if we imagine like an iceberg, this is the part of the iceberg that's above the water. You can see it, you know it is crystal clear. And we have the subconscious, which is the stuff that's just below the surface of the water in this iceberg analogy. You can look over the edge of the water, you can see it. It's a little bit murky and distorted and discolored, but it's there. So the subconscious stuff is a lot of the things that you do automatically, your behaviors, the things that you jump right into, your triggers that you don't understand why they're there. Those are all subconscious. Way below the surface and actually occupying about 95% of your brain's neural capacity is the unconscious mind. And the unconscious is the part of the iceberg that you can't see. It's so far below the water, it runs for miles. And what that looks like in your brain is it's almost like a junk closet. The way that our brains hold on to memories is they use 4 different things, and it's called the subconscious feedback loop, these 4 things. Experiences, so like how you see something, smell something, taste something, touch something, all your senses. That sensory input is the experience that goes into your brain, triggers a chemical reaction called emotions. Those emotions are a messenger. They send a message down your spinal cord to the body about how to react physically. So part 3 is physical reactions. And then last, this message has to go back up through the spinal cord to the brain in the form of a thought through the enteric nervous system. So those thoughts actually come from your gut. This is how all memories are stored. Because most of our mind is unconscious material, what happens is that loop continues to run, and it kind of puts us into autopilot, where you don't have to think about the things that started that experience in the first place. Your body will just kick into gear if anything resembles the 4 parts of that. So if you were bullied in the 2nd grade for getting up and stuttering when you were talking to the class, anytime you need to get up and speak as an adult, or anytime you feel like there's a bunch of eyes on you, even if it's a Zoom meeting and you're not the one speaking, that subconscious feedback loop will kick into gear and you will be triggered and you won't know why. Shadow work is the process of going back to those moments, literally going back to the moments that had happened the first time, the moments that you've forgotten, and re-experiencing all 4 parts of that subconscious feedback loop and changing at least one of them. For me, the breath is the easiest to change. But when we change it, we change how it exists in all 4 of those places. And when we change the experience, the emotions, the physical reactions, and the thoughts, we are literally rewiring your brain by doing a process called synaptic pruning, where we're getting rid of old neural pathways, and synaptogenesis, where we're making new ones. That's my book. Now you don't have to buy it. Love it.
All the
And
free
obviously, I'm
content.
kidding. This goes into explicit detail. It's very intricate, and I give you the step-by-step of the how to do shadow work part. But it's important for me that people understand the science behind it, because even though it's like a woo spiritual practice in the sense that you're meditating and you're going back to these moments and you can see it so clearly and you can feel like you're there, there's so much science backing it up. And the basis of it is Jungian psychology from the 1800s.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. You like you said, you kind of went through the book, but there's so much,
That's the
there's
first
so
three
much.
chapters.
Yeah, you can just skip to page 72 and start from there. That's actually kind of one of the reasons I love having these types of conversations and watching I really like watching like documentaries, conversations that people have, or explanations, like just hearing it verbally, because as much as I really value information and I love learning, I am not much of a reader, to be perfectly honest. It's so much harder for me to read something that is longer than like an article. So like to learn and have an opportunity to ask questions, just to hear and have like, a face with the words verbally spoken, link it to your voice, like it will stick in my head so much better than me reading it on a page. But I think that's one of the great things about the way that you're able to support the world with shadow work, is that you have so many different mediums that you have shared this information and continue to share it, and you make it accessible, and it's not overly technical or confusing or overwhelming. And if anybody's actually consumed the content you've put out, they probably don't think it's scary, even though it has the word shadow in it.
No, it's just a word, I swear. But it's true. I do put stuff on YouTube every single day because that's a source that people usually go to for learning. And
Hmm.
TikTok, I know it's not your favorite, but there's so much that you can learn in that space if you're following the right people and not just consuming for the sake of consuming.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, that's the main reason I don't have a TikTok, is because
Give
I
you
see
such
the
a time suck.
potential to get lost down the rabbit hole, and I and it takes enough effort to not do that with Instagram. I didn't need to give myself another challenge. I can totally see the value. I can see why it is entertaining, just, at a non-educational level in general, but yeah, I'm not quite ready. I also resisted Instagram until like a few years ago. So
Yeah, my
I'm slow to add new things into my life that I think can drain my time, because I have other things I want to do with my time. So I need to be real
you're a
selective.
productivity coach, you better.
Yeah, yeah, it would be pretty bad if I was like, yeah, you should definitely, set those timers that say how long you're on social media, or turn your phone screen off. But I'm sitting here scrolling for the next 2 hours. That would I lead by example. I cannot be a hypocrite. That would be terrible.
My rule of thumb for social media is I produce, I don't consume. So I don't watch TikTok. I don't go on Reels and just scroll. I don't watch YouTube really, but I make content for all the platforms, because if I have something
Hmm.
to say, I figure it's a way I can put it out there and people can love it or they can hate it, but now it's there and it's free and they can do
Yeah,
whatever they want with that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Do you have we're talking about like apps and platforms and all that. Do you have like an app, or you talk about you have like automation services and things like that? Is there something that you have found that has been so helpful, that like, I don't want to say everybody should do it because everybody's different and needs something different, but like that you would recommend to a lot to a lot of people? Like it can, it can really help, a certain app or service or something like that.
I'm actually not big on technology. I know I talked about when I started how I tried to just take advantage of as much automation as possible. But now that I have the means to be able to pay for teams, I have a marketing team, I have a virtual assistant, I have an OBM, I have a publicist. So I don't use a lot of apps for things anymore.
Okay.
What I do, what I recommend everybody do, as hard as it is to read a book every day, even if it's just a few pages, just a little bit, because there's so much that our brains do differently when we're staring at a piece of paper taking in information than they do when we're watching a screen or when we're interacting with people one on one. And we want to try and hit as many different facets of our brain's neural capacity as humanly possible. So for me, it's reading, and it's a non-negotiable. I'll read something different. It doesn't always have to be something self-help. In fact, most of the time it's not. A lot of the time it's reading for pleasure. But when I do that and I start my day that way and I really get that going, like before the kids even wake up, I am just so much more on the ball than I am otherwise. And it gives me amazing ideas about where to go. There's so much we can learn.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. I get a lot of recommendations. The reason I asked about like apps and things like that is because I know they work. There's so many out there. First of all, there's something that works for everybody, and it's usually pretty easy to give a recommendation. But I really appreciate you being honest and saying, nah, that's not really my thing. I do this because whoever else is listening to this that's like, I don't really use the apps and stuff either. I haven't heard any recommendations myself that really like spoke to me. That's validation right there that you don't necessarily need that. And
I
yeah,
know.
a team is like living apps. That really kind of dehumanizes your wonderful, valuable team. I'm sorry
They're
about
incredible. And
that.
there's so much value in having people and connections because they can do so much more and they know the app so much more intimately than I do. So if I say like
Yeah.
I need, I don't know, I'm going on a book signing tour through different parts of PA, New Jersey, and up to New York in November. And so I told my team, like, I just need all that content created and I need it sent out to these people and it just gets done and it's like magic, like poof, it just appears. And
Uh-huh.
lovely. But
Yep.
I wouldn't recommend doing that before you're financially there because the
Right.
stress around not having the money for that it's really hard. And we have to be careful first that we're always taking care of ourselves and creating the financial space and freedom to be able to do those things. So you work through it in the beginning so that you can rest once you're ready.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, that makes a whole lot of sense because, jumping too far ahead at the beginning is not really going to get you ahead. It's just you're just going to stumble a little bit before you find your footing, and we already do that enough when we try something new. So no need to put yourself in a situation where you're more stressed out about a new situation. So that's great advice. Yeah, what else was I gonna ask? I had another question. I totally forgot when I started talking again. What was it about? Because I know, yeah, we hit on so many different things. I'm just thinking like through my list of things I wanted to talk about, we have crammed a lot into a short amount of, well, I guess
You
it's
crushed it.
short, but
You crushed it. And if anybody has extra questions later and there's things that they're curious about, you can all reach out to me on social media. It's at IAM Danielle Massi. That's my website too, at just IAM Danielle Massi. So you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, on my website. I'm constantly over there responding to people. So don't hesitate. You can always reach out. If you look on YouTube and you want to learn more about shadow work, just type in Danielle Massi Shadow Work Masterclass. Or I think if you just type Shadow Work Masterclass, that'll pop right up to the top. My hair is blonde. Don't let that fool you. It was very blonde before. I'm no longer, but the information's still good, even with my shitty hair.
there's my last question.
Oh, you
What
found it?
motivated you to change the hair color? It's such like a fiery, bold choice.
I've always wanted to do this. And before I got into any of my real business stuff, I was a licensed psychotherapist for over a decade. And when you're a therapist, you have to be tabula rasa. You have to be a blank slate. You can't have opinions. You can't wear certain colors. You can't invoke strong feelings. It was like being locked in a cage. And I, if you couldn't tell, am someone who curses like a sailor and I have a lot of fun. And I just felt so confined by that. So freedom for me was slow, where I stopped being a therapist a few years ago. And I've slowly been breaking out of that shell. And then it's like, well, you're still a mom. You have to look a certain way. And this year, with the book coming out and with my courses being where they are, and I'm hitting levels of success where I'm getting known both nationally and internationally, I was like, if there's a time that you're going to change the way you look, it has to be now because you're going to solidify your place in everybody's minds the way that you look. So you better love it. And it's the best thing I ever did. So glad that I did it.
That's a great story. I love that because I know, people change their hair, change their,
Mhm.
get different nails, get
Yep.
nail
But
colors.
from a
There's,
branding
there's,
perspective, it's like I choosing what I'm going to do now, it's probably going to sit with me for a little while. So I had to be sure that I really liked it.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That's great. I love that. And you want to be known for who you really are, who you feel most comfortable with, because you really are putting yourself out there. You just said you're going on a book tour. Like you're gonna meet so many new people and they're gonna remember you and they're gonna remember you in the way that you want to be remembered as well. And
As a
that's
natural redhead. No, I'm just kidding.
yes, as a natural redhead. I think we'll kind of wrap things up there. Was there anything else? I know you touched on how people can connect with you. I love that. That's great. For anybody who registered, I'll also put that contact information in the recap. Is there anything else that we missed? Anything else you wanted to share that you have going on coming up?
The book tour is going to be announced on my social media. So if you're around, I'd
Okay.
love to meet you in person. And if you do end up wanting to sign up for that writer's course, because Majette just asked for it, I'm going to put it in the chat here. And then Kelly, if you want to share it with people, you can share it with anybody in your group. It
Yeah, yeah,
literally will take you through
absolutely.
every step of the book writing process. And then Create Your Light Academy enrollment is open. So if you're thinking about doing shadow work, which Majette actually did shadow work with me, she was in my program a couple years ago. It's just the most transformational thing you'll ever do for yourself. And I know that firsthand.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge, all of your recommendations, especially the ones that don't, fit in the typical boxes or, that I love that you are you, that you are authentic to yourself and it gives me confidence to be myself too. Like I love seeing that because you kind of mirror people that you are around, that you're talking to in a way. And not that I'm ready to dye my hair red, but it can be reflected in the way that I present myself as well. So I love that. I love that you are just a beacon of light, and ironically, as the Shadow Queen.
There's a reason I call it Create Your Light Academy. Thank
Yep, exactly, exactly. Well, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your night, and
you for having me.
cheers.
Oh, cheers.
Yeah.